secret.
Well, hello everybody. Welcome to Nom Talk Network and welcome to Basic Binges. Tonight we're going to cover a slew of freaking episodes on the Sandman on Netflix, the Sandman. And I have been your host for the entire series. I love this series. It has been something that has changed me personally and everything that has gone on. And I would love to introduce my wonderful and amazing and beautiful and awesome, wonderful guests for the evening. So I'd like to introduce you two. Please introduce yourselves, name, where you're from, and just briefly how you got introduced to Sandman. And either of you can go first.
Please. Sure, I can go. Hey, I'm Beth. I am here in LA. Happy to be here. And I was introduced, so I actually didn't start watching the series like right when it dropped because I actually used to work in comic book publishing and I used to work at DC. And so like I'm very familiar with these characters.
Oh, you're the one. You're the one.
Yeah. I actually have not read like the entirety of the original series, but I am very familiar with the characters and like about the story. At a certain point, it's almost like how I've never watched Game of Thrones, but I know what Game of Thrones is about. And so there was part of me that was like, I don't know if I really want to watch this. I don't know if I want to get into this. And then I was home one weekend and I was like, all right, I'll check it out. And episode 1, I was like, this is gorgeous. I'm in. And that was it. And then I watched, I think, all of them in one weekend.
Yeah, it was insane at how when you watch I think it was for me, I watched 1 through 4 in like a sitting and I was like, okay, this is a lot. I don't know if I can do that. And then and then the next day it was like 5 and 6 and I was like, I need a mental health day. I need a break. I need to fucking like all that stuff. And then 7, 8, 9, and 10 and I was like, okay, fine, I can watch that shit. So yeah, I totally agree with you. It was just like, for me, it was like in sections and it was so great. So it's wonderful to meet you, Beth. Beth, what are you snacking on anything? Are you drinking anything?
Well, I'm gay, so I have 3 drinks.
I love it. Me too.
I have an iced tea, I have a beer, and I have a water. I also have some very good Tate's cookies. Okay, can I tell you about these cookies really quick though?
Absolutely.
So like 3 years ago, Tate's made a limited edition lemon cookie and it was incredible. And I got a package of them and then they were gone. They were no more. And then I was in a Whole Foods yesterday with my best friend because I'm poor. I don't shop at Whole Foods, but I was with her and they have them. They brought them back and they're new and they're just here all the time now. And I literally gasped in a Whole Foods and bought 2 bags. Anyway, they're great.
And then people look at you and they're like, what the fuck? And you're like, I don't care. They have fucking
it was downtown LA.
Cookies.
I was not the weirdest person there.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I love that. Well, good for you. I'm so excited for you to be here. Tony, what's going on? What are you munching on? What are your introductions to Sandman? Let's go.
Sandman. Well, I was kind of perusing, looking for the things to watch, and I got a suggestion. Hey, check out Sandman. It's by Neil Gaiman. And I was like, hey, I know that name. I'm gonna check this out. kind of like you two both said. I just gave it an episode or 2, and the next thing I knew, I was through it all already. So I was pretty stoked. Probably one evening straight through.
Yeah, it's shocking and not shocking. So for me, I'm the kind of person that's like, I don't want to fucking wait every week to like find out like what episode comes out. I want the whole fucking series out so I can choose, right? Like choose your own fucking adventure to like when I can watch it. And what I love about this series is like I said, I watched it in 3 spurts and it was only for what I could take. And I agree with you. Like, it was like, yeah, like Sandman, here it is. And I've heard about it. And, I'm not a huge DC fan. Sorry, Beth, but like, I'm not a huge DC fan. But then when I saw this, I was like, and then I heard it was Neil Gaiman, who I've seen American Gods, like seasons 1 and 2, which are my favorite. The rest can just go down the trash and shitter. Like I was
there's
like,
more?
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, wait, there's more? Is that like still on or something?
They ended up with 3.
That's
Yeah.
so weird. They have to have
Yeah.
run out of the source material because it's
Yeah.
not that they covered a lot of it. And sorry, I've read
We don't-
everything Neil Gaiman's ever written other than the Sandman.
We don't talk about Bruno. We don't talk
So,
about
like,
those of us.
yeah,
No,
I've
no,
read the book.
no.
I've read all of his novels: Stardust, Neverwhere, Ocean at the End of the Lane,
Absolutely.
American Gods.
Yeah,
Him being involved with this made it more of a possibility to watch too. I was like, well, if Gaiman helped develop it, then it's probably okay.
That was
Yeah,
an instant yes for me as soon as I heard the name. Not many names make me do that, honestly.
Yeah, I think what made it for me was the fact that, like, when I was watching American Gods, it was like cool, you get your main story, you get your like heterosexual couple, but then you get like these like same-sex couple vibes, you get these, you get everything, right? Like you get interracial couples, you get all these things, you get like people that play gods that should be where they come from and like what they're actually represented as. And I think for me it wasn't a thing. And I think the last episode that we talked about, no, my bad. We talked about casting with shit. I can't remember what we did talk about, but it was along the lines of, it was the new Rings of Power series with Lord of the Rings, where it was like the fact that we
People
have black
are so
hobbits,
mad.
black dwarves, black elves. I'm like, that wasn't a thing for me. Like watching that, it was like, oh, these are actors. These are people that are actually playing these roles, right? And I think specifically for Sandman, like the fact that like you can see in my background, like this is the original like depiction and comic book depiction of like all of Death or Dream's siblings, and like the fact that like Death was played by a black woman made it
She was
absolutely
incredible.
Incredible.
She was
like,
incredible.
Beautiful. And I loved it. And you know, the fact that like people are up in arms about like semantics about this bullshit still, I'm like, you know what? Go fuck yourself. Like this should not be a thing anymore. Like we shouldn't be looking at this. This shouldn't be something that like we focus all of our efforts on. Like we should be focusing on whether the content that's being put out is the content that people actually want to see, feel, like digest, right, and like do all that stuff. So so before we get into the nitty-gritty, I want to say hi to Q. Hi Q, happy belated birthday. I know I think it was last week or like a couple of days ago, but we love you Q. Q says hi all. I can't wait to dive into this. I can say this series has me shook and mesmerized, and each episode builds up on the last episode, and it's chef's kiss. Absolutely, I love it. Let's just fucking dive in, right? So we're gonna cover 7, 8, and 9 tonight. I will say, from my experience, these are not my favorite episodes. My favorite episodes were 5 and 6. These episodes were more of, I don't want to say filler, but they needed to address certain things that happened in the comics, with specifically with Rose, and specifically with sort of what was going on with Dream, and how he sort of got how there was a threat of being depowered in the entire series.
Agreed.
This is definitely the functional, like, we have to actually do the story part now episodes.
Although it kind of felt like season 8 of Game of Thrones, maybe more season 7 of Game of Thrones, because it feels like things were like, oh, and then this happened. Oh, and then this happened.
So it's definitely, the story is definitely like super condensed, because again, they're really trying to plow through that exposition. I also think though that part of, because when I just went through them again before this, one of the things that bothered me, it was like one of the only things about the series that bothered me, that I think makes this run of episodes also feel weird, is the fact that they kept the initial timeline of all the early plot stuff, but have pushed the modern day plot stuff out of the 80s, which was the original modern day when it was written, in 40 years later, and are just trying to act like the timeline still totally makes sense and is fine. And maybe if we just power through this fast enough, you're never going to think about how old any of these people are and why it makes no sense. They're like, yeah, it's her great grandmother. It's fine that she was asleep in bed and is now 120 whatever and looks like she's 60. Don't worry about it. Like,
I just felt it was really contrived. Where it's like, oh well, her grandmother's important, but then it just like skips over her mom and then goes to her because now she's important because that's where we need the story right now. And it just felt very glossed over, super fast. It honestly felt like the show needed to take a lot more time leading up to that so it made more sense instead of, well, you just need this information, but it's not really important. We're going to focus on Rose. Let's go. You know?
Yeah, sure. And you know, I think one of the weird aspects of like these episodes are like the cult of the killers, right? Like when they're trying to get Corinthian's attention, and I was like, what the fuck? I'm like, they're disguising this as like, oh, this is what it is, and it's like, nah, bitch. Like, you guys kill people for a living.
I loved that. It had the same energy as White Witches with fucking murder podcasts. I was obsessed with them.
Excuse me. I love My Favorite Murder. Excuse you.
I do too, but it had the same energy.
It did, absolutely. And to be fair, and like I've said this in multiple like reviews of this show, Corinthian, I want to do you. You're great. Like, I don't know who you are. I don't like. I actually.
God, I hate how much I like him.
He's incredible.
He's like so good, and he's so.
See, I had the opposite effect of the Corinthian. For him, he never came off as scary or intimidating at all. He always just was kind of sleazy. He felt like
flirty.
He felt like a used cars salesman that just like kills off screen a lot. That's it. And it was.
Oh yeah, I was certainly never scared by him.
Yeah, there was other people like different collectors at the convention. Just the look of them was just ick, just
absolutely.
But Corinthian, I didn't like him. I didn't hate him. I wasn't afraid of him. He was just a guy with mouth eyes. You know?
Yeah.
I guess you have to think about his original purpose. His original purpose as a dream was just that. You know, that was his sole purpose. So he's a one-dimensional character in a lot of ways because he is designed to be a one-dimensional character. And through being in the human world, he has developed himself into this three-dimensional character. So all of his choices, as sleazy and weird as they are, they're the only choices that are his own.
Yeah, I think for me, like you're right. I wasn't scared of him. I think because in the first episode, you kind of realize that like Dream was like, hey, I created you. Like, I need to like get rid of you. And then he was like, nah, bitch, like, you're not doing that. And then like, he just existed. I think for me, it was just the general, like, for example, when he like went over to where Rose used to stay in the apartment and that guy was there. And he's like, hey, like Rose isn't here, but like, let's do it. And I was like, nah, like he's gonna kill you. Like he's gonna do that. And Corinthian was just like, no, I just want to like get my rocks off and like, it's fine. And I'm like, if that was me and like, he was like, I don't want to take my glasses off. I'd be like, okay, when get the fuck out. And he probably would have killed me. You know, who knows? But it was a thing where I was like, I'm not scared of you, but also like, there's something here that I don't know of, right? Like there's a mystery, right? Like, especially after like 24/7 where I'm like, I'm scared shitless of what's going to happen in this entire fucking series, right? Like you could get something from Dream and like make things like completely terrible, right? But also too, it was the fact that like, he like throughout the entire convention, he like made sure that like he got Rose, he knew who she was. He was like, and Rose's brother, right? Like he was like, I'm gonna keep you here. I'm gonna keep you both here. Here's what's gonna happen. Like it's not a thing. Like do what you want to do. But my thing was like all these murders, right? Like the way that they did it and the way that they like explained how they did it in a weird codic way was like, this happens every day, right? Like you don't know if like these people have like coded meetings and like in like you know, like certain like areas. And so it was just, it was very like, it was just real.
Mostly dark web stuff, yeah.
Yeah, it was just, it was very real for me. And it was very like, shit, like the things that I'm like super interested in, which is like murder, like crime, like I don't want to do it, but like listening to it and just like getting my like knowledge of it was just, it was insane. But let's talk about Rose for a bit, right? Like let's talk about the Vortex, who she is like this like this human who is born like every couple like hundred thousands of years, and she has the ability to alter how our world affects the dream world, right? And we sort of see this after episode, what is it, episode 5 or 6, where Desire is sort of playing on this, right? Like where he is, or she is playing on this entire like thing to like overthrow Dream, right? Like because they all think that like Dream is like above everybody else, right? So when Rose comes along, I do have to say, I didn't really feel her character. I didn't really feel like this was somebody that I was like, you are that powerful. Like, this is who you are, right? Like, I felt like it was a little bit too innocent, a little bit too sort of like, yeah, like, oh, blah, 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 blah. And then this is who I am, right? But, you know, what do I know? Let's talk about Rose and her character through 7, 8, and 9. Let's start with Beth. What do you think about Rose's character?
I mean, well, one, it's good for them. Cute way to tie it back to the diner episode. But like, well, I mean, that's it. She's the Rose that was on the phone. She's the same girl.
Sure.
And then you see the photo of the girl from the diner in the apartment. The Corinthian picks it up. I mean, and this is just me being old. I know she's supposed to be 21, but she looks like she's 10, and that like just changes the way I perceive everything happening in the story. Which is like my own brain's fault, not hers. She was a wonderful actress. It's that was the point of her casting. You know, it just didn't work for me. Yeah, I think that of all the characters, she is the one who suffers the most from this expedited version of telling this portion of the story. I think you're right. There is a lot of it. She just kind of seems to be, I guess conceptually, because she draws things to her as the Vortex. It's like that's one explanation for why things just keep happening, because she keeps pulling them in against her will, but it also kind of robs her of agency, which is frustrating because she is really trying to find her brother and really trying to do a good thing. She has a noble goal and is just kind of getting tossed around by the universe. And that's a bummer for her. I think she's a better character and she deserves better than this version of the story, but I think she did well. I think the actress did a great job.
Yeah, I think the actress did a good job with what she was given, like in the time span that what she did. And like my thing is it with the actress, like she was great. I just feel like the character could have been more developed. And I
just want to acknowledge that a lesser actress could have not done as well with so little.
Sure, absolutely. And I did. So I like weirdly liked what they did with the house that she like landed in. With all the characters, it was almost like an American Horror Story film, but like turned Sandman, right? Like where we had these characters, right? We had these people that were like different, right? We had like Barbie and Ken. We had these two twins that were like the Wednesday twins from fucking the Addams Family, right? Like we had the innkeeper who I fucking love, original Kinky Boots, right? Like I'm like, hell fucking yeah, let's do it. Drag, all this stuff, right? Like all of it. But it was a little weird for people, right? Like it was a little weird for people who hadn't been introduced to all this stuff. And like you're right, she drew all of these like energies into this like these couple of episodes, and it was just very interesting.
Yeah.
Tony, what do you think about... Go ahead.
I was just gonna say the only other thing is that like episode 5 being named The Doll's House, like really set this up to be so good because that's like the famous collection. And then I was like, this is a little underwhelming to give that one that title.
Right. It was right. And it like I remember looking at it and like, you know, when you go on Netflix, you're like, it's the dollhouse. And I'm like, what is this have to do with it? Right? Like what does that do with anything? Tony, what did you think about the vortex? What did you think about Rose's character?
Honestly, in episodes 7 and 8, I was really taken in with what was happening in the real world side of things because it resonated with me as a person because I grew up in a group home from 7 to 18. So like, it was like I was looking at that, and I was like, first of all, I was like, some of this is right, but then other things are just grossly wrong. And then I go, oh, it's just for theatrics and to play up the drama, but then that's just part of me just feels gutted because it's set up to make the CPS system as this altruistic thing that, oh, we only do bad because we care so much. And you have this social worker that's just this level of apathy that's going on. And like, oh, here's the sister of somebody that's in the system. Well, I'm not even going to get you in contact with your brother just because I'm being so protective of this child. And it was just, for me, it was both cringy, but then also I've been in those bad homes. So it's like, yo, you get into them, your social worker probably doesn't even friggin' know because they don't even stop by. So like the whole idea of somebody having to beg the social worker to stop by was like, all right, that's true. But the fact that she actually cares, that's BS. But I'm like, it kind of goes along with what we were talking about earlier in that it feels like it's been pushed out of time. Whereas if it was still set in the 80s, certain things would make a little bit more sense. But then, because that's closer to the time that I grew up in that system, but still it just pulled me out so much. It was like the one time I was like, well, Neil doesn't know what he's talking about when he's writing this, unfortunately. And it kind of just like disconnected me from it. Once I got past that and got to like the convention itself, I enjoyed that story a bit more, but it felt very plot-wise around Rose as the vortex. Everything seemed very convenient. It's like, oh, we have a conflict here. Well, here's this bit of information that solves that conflict for you because did you know this about Rose? And then we move on to the next conflict, and it's like, oh, well, did you know this about Rose? And it didn't really feel like the characters ever needed to do anything except for waiting for things to be explained to them. And it was always, oh, I'm almost explaining these things, and then something interrupts us, and then we can't further explain it, and the conflict goes further, and then somebody explains it more, and then it resolves itself. And it was just almost defeating at the end. It was like, wait a second, I needed something to be figured out more so than, oh, you know, it was supposed to be her, so don't even worry about it. Everything you were concerned with, don't worry about. Everything's been solved. And it's like,
and she's a walking Deus Ex Machina because, again, I really think that this particular storyline suffers from being condensed. I mean, the original book is it's like I think it's like issue 10 or something is the Doll's House, but then like it's a whole story arc that's like 6 or 7 issues maybe. So like imagine each of those had gotten a full hour, the whole thing would have felt more rounded out. But to do it in this super sped up way it was disingenuous to the story in a lot of ways because you're right, it completely robs her of her agency and makes each of the characters feel more like caricatures.
Season 7 Game of Thrones.
We keep coming back to that, and I love it. I do want to talk about in the beginning when the librarian, I forget her name. Lucienne talks to Dream and says, you have 3 people missing from the entire realm. and it is it's definitely the Corinthian. It is
Gull?
the yes, and then it is the something green.
Yeah,
Fiddler's
Glenn.
Green.
Yeah.
Yes, and I absolutely love, and I knew from the jump that Stephen Fry was this dude. And I
Fiddler's
was like,
Green.
yes, I was like, it's you. I'm fucking guessing it's you. And he was like, oh well, I'm gonna watch out after you. And he's like, and Rose is like, okay, I'll trust you. And I'm like, bitch, don't trust anybody.
Random
What are you
British
doing?
guy?
Like, what? Like you're outside of a bar, like people are gonna kill you. And he's like, no, it's fine. It's good. And then like they go on a road trip, and then she eventually finds out that that's Fiddler's Green. But I do want to talk
because he was wearing tweed.
I mean, yeah, but also it's Stephen Fry, excuse me.
I mean, also he had a sword for a cane, and she knew technically who he was because he had been vouched for by all the people she lives with. So it wasn't
Sure.
like, it was sketch, but it wasn't like as sketch as it could be.
But also it's Stephen Fry. Like if Stephen
Also,
Fry came
yes.
to my rescue, I'd be like, I trust you. I don't care.
Yeah.
It
What
was
do you want to
Stephen
do?
Fry with that mustache. That mustache was sinister.
Oh my god.
No.
And then we had who was the one that could morph?
Gold.
Galt.
Yeah, gold.
Gold. That episode was absolutely beautiful. And then we see, the latter part. I don't know if it was in 9 or 10 where it was in 10. We'll talk about that in 10 or 11 episode. But when basically they go and try to rescue Rose's brother, who is being inhabited by
Foster parents.
like terrible parents who are like, we just want, like the dad is like, we just want the money, like we don't care how we're taking care of them and all that stuff. Which Tony, I don't know if you want to like speak to it. My mom is she was a CASA representative, which is she represents like foster kids in the court voluntarily, and she will follow certain kids for their entire life. It was hard to watch because I'm like, this is what people go through, like and
It doesn't
kids
happen
go
everywhere, but it does absolutely happen.
Absolutely. And watching it, and even with my mom like popping in like at random points, she was like, what's going on? And I'm like, it's too hard to explain. I don't want to explain it because you're going to get upset, right? Like, and from that moment to the point where she's like, I don't want to be a nightmare. Like, I want to be something that kids actually dream of and that they can just be, right? I thought that was absolutely beautiful. I thought that was absolutely beautiful done. And then, spoiler alert, I mean, it's been out for weeks, but spoiler alert, she actually becomes a dream, right? Like where Dream is like,
and butterfly wings.
yeah, he's like, you know what? This is what you deserve. And what I love about this entire series, and I think we can talk about 7, 8, 9, is the fact that like Dream becomes more like human or like more humane in this entire like process rather than being like, I'm above them, right? Like, and I feel like episode 6 with Death completely eradicated my like, oh, he's an asshole like episode, like thing, right? And I absolutely adore him.
Yeah.
Right. But also like you learn that like he actually cares and like he actually believes that like these people are worth like investing in, right? And so I love that. But 7, 8, and 9, okay, so the reason why I feel like 7, 8, and 9 weren't sort of like the strongest points was because I feel like everything happened so fast in a way where it was like, I don't quite understand, but I do, but I don't. In a way where I think Beth, you like brought up the point where like Rose's character could have been stronger and like the actress wasn't the problem. It was the fact that like they didn't develop it in a way where it was like it was believable to the point where she was that powerful, right? Like
I think they're leaning into the fact that throughout the whole story, they've set the audience up to subvert their expectations about how things should work, because they're like, hey, we're going to be dealing with a lot of abstract ideas. You know, we're going to have Dream, who's a lord of dreams and one of the endless you've never heard of, and he's going to go toe-to-toe with Lucifer, and you're just going to go with it. And they're going to have an open mic jam battle about I'm this and you're that. I'm AIDS. I'm the ozone layer, you know. So it sets up this, hey, don't expect things to make perfect sense, so that at the end, if they need to rush, they can lean in that it doesn't have to make 100% sense. They'll go, oh well, it's Sandman. That's how they do things. You know, they'll hand wave a bit of this, and you have to go with it.
Yeah, and
well, I mean,
like,
isn't that just suspension of disbelief, which is what you have to give to buy into any story? Like being mad at a story for asking you to buy into it is being mad at a story, which at the end of the day is kind of the metaphor of the entirety of the Sandman universe. We're all created by something we're all made up, essentially. We either make ourselves up or someone makes us up for us. And that's what it's about. I mean, the Corinthian is ultimately fighting for agency, as is Dream, as much as he is one of the endless and he accepts his form and he accepts his fate. This is him realizing that accepting your fate and resigning to your fate are not the same thing. And that's the development he's going through, you know, in tandem with his connection, his deeper connection to humanity.
Sure.
I guess that's why it scares him when he comes to realize he actually cares for a friend. That's why he lashes out, because it's something he's completely new to him and freaks him the hell out.
Oh, of course.
Only reaction, get mad.
Right, but I also feel like it's also one of those things where we see a series where it's not like Game of Thrones, right? Like it's not like you know, a series where you have these like ultimate beings, right? Like gods, right? Where they have ultimate power, they rule, they do what they do what they want. And in this, like, it's not that, right? Like they find out that humans actually have agency over them, right? And they don't rule over humans, but rather there's a symbiotic relationship between the both of them. And I think we see this in 24/7 when Dream realizes that, like, cool, like he thought he was taking away like people's fears and people's like, you know, ability to lie. And Dream is like, no, you took away their ability to dream, right? Like to be the greater of, right? And I think in that episode, it made him realize that, like, shit, like if this is gone, like that's it. Like I don't exist, my siblings don't exist, right? And I feel like that was something that like got me in that episode, where I was like, it's a symbiotic relationship between all of these people and us, right? Like, because if we don't have these experiences in life, like we don't necessarily need these people, right? And so yeah. But so episode 7, 8, and 9, we basically see that Rose gains everything that she needs to gain in order to sort of realize that she is who she is, right? And by episode 9, right, like we have her and her brother like in Corinthian's room. This is what's going on. And she's like, shit, like, and Dream is like, you know what? I'm gonna like face her in the dream realm when she goes to sleep, and do all of that. And you know, I don't know if it was in episode 9 or 10 where he faces Corinthian and basically is like, dude, like, yeah, like, okay,
Sort of doing the ball by head.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that in 10. Yeah. We'll talk about that in 10 and 11 because I
think
didn't even
9
know.
ends right after the murder at the cereal convention. Yeah.
The cereal convention where they like Fruit Loops and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Which I think the entire series got dark for me at that point because I was like, yeah, like I know what you're all about, but I didn't think you'd do that, right? And like to be fair, the guy was like posing as a serial killer, right? Like, and he was like, yeah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
But then Corinthian was like, nah, like you want to see what I do? Like, let's get this thing. But I would like to say that like during this time that the people that Rose was staying with, they all had their like hopes and dreams like during that time, right? And we saw it. We saw it happen.
Ghost
And
Baby.
yeah.
That was wild.
Insane.
Ghost Baby.
and it was in the comic, right?
Yeah, it was. The only thing I do hate, like, do actually find not terrifying about the Corinthian particularly, but like I don't do eye stuff. Like whenever it's like an eye thing in a film or a movie and I can see it coming, I'm like, nope, I can't watch this. It's just like there's so many. I'm a gross 12-year-old boy at heart. There are so many nasty things I could watch. Something about eye stuff I can't do. So there was a lot of this. I was like, I might have to not. Can I watch this part?
24/7 was probably horrible for you.
Oh, it was not great.
Yeah. And I feel like that was the part where, you know, like you see the teeth in the eyes, right? And you're like, I know what he's about. Like, this is what he does. But also at the same time, you're like, I don't know. For me, I was like, why are you doing that? Like, what does that do? Like, you're taking people's ability to see, but also like, there's no.
No, I think he full on kills them.
Well, yeah, but he takes
Just like his eyes.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that's the point, is that one, we don't know if that's what he was doing in Dream. In Dream, he might not have necessarily been a murderer. He could have just been a dude with teeth for eyes, and that was scary to people. But so for him, he even explains it earlier on when he first meets what's her name, the woman, and she has the necklace. I forgot her name already. He explains it. He says, like, you know, this is, for me, this is about power. And he like, the point is he might not have necessarily been a killer in the Dream, but I think when he gives his speech and when they're talking to him in this episode too, they talk about how like he inspired all of them because he's kind of in a lot of ways the quote unquote original serial killer, because he's been at this since the 20s, which is why they think he's the newest Corinthian or whatever. So like what that does for him, I think because it is about power and because it is about practicality for him, it's why he doesn't kill everybody. He's not necessarily a killer. Like, that's not what drives him. The killing is not what drives him. Every single murder to him has a purpose. He didn't kill the guy he slept with because there was no purpose to it. He killed the fake guy because the purpose was to bond all these other people to him, because he is about power. He kills people when he has to, not because he necessarily is driven by it.
That's deep. Damn.
I thought he just liked eyes. just liked eyes.
But
Like,
you know,
well, then
brown
you
ones,
have to
gray
assume.
ones.
So then if you want to get into like psychopath pathology and serial killer pathology, then you kind of have to assume, okay, the reason that he takes the eyes is because maybe he eats them with his mouth eyes or whatever. But like, again, that may not necessarily be a function of him as a dream. That might just be his power thing of the one way in which he feels powerless is that he doesn't have eyes. So he's going to take the eyes of his victims. If the ultimate goal is to kill them, the eyes don't matter other than he wants a trophy, which again is kind of the serial killer's points about that they're all collectors. They all keep trophies because he was the original and he kept trophies. So like they tie it together, you know.
Yeah.
I just wish he was a little bit more scarier. Like I just wish his delivery just had a
maybe
bit more
he's just
serious
not your
to
nightmare.
it. Maybe.
Right. And I mean,
I thought his eyes were weird, but he never seemed like main antagonist or even.
Here's the thing. If he came to me and he was like, "Do you want a drink?" I'd be like, "Absolutely, yeah." It's like, "Do you want to go up to him?" "Absolutely, yeah." And then he was like, "I'm gonna kill you." I'd be scared. I'd be a little freaked. Yeah. You know what I mean? And then what can I do? Like, what can I do? But 789, we build up to this sort of, I would say we build up to this storyline of the vortex is this powerful being and she can overthrow Dream, like, period, right? Like, it gets built up. This is why the Corinthian is like, the Corinthian wants her. This is why, all these people like want to sort of support this individual. And when I had looked up and I'd researched sort of why this was going on, it was because people actually believed that Dream thought that he ruled all of that. And like, if you watch the very first episode, you're like, oh, this dude's a fucking asshole. Like, he feels like he's the shit and all this stuff. But as you grow with him, you're like, no, like, he doesn't think that. He has to believe that he is this sort of like being that like rules over people in order for him to have order, right? And then there can be simple things like witchcraft that can overthrow him, right? And like the fact that he was gone for 100 years and he comes back to his realm and it's in complete chaos, right? And he's like, no, like, it is as simple as that. Like, he's like, it's not that I feel like I rule people, but it's the fact that like it can go in disarray in any moment, right? And I feel like
completely ineffectual without his gear.
Yeah, like powerless without it. And that wasn't something that I realized until he was like, no, I have to save her. Like, I have to be the one to like confront her in the dream world. I have to be the one that can be like, hey, like, and meanwhile, his siblings, like Dream and
Desire.
Yeah.
Despair.
Sorry.
Desire and Despair.
Desire and Despair, like, we're gonna plot against him. And I'm like, you fucking assholes, like, shut the fuck up. And I love the fact that in the end he like confronts Desire and is like, you fuck with me, I'm gonna fuck with you. How about that? But yeah, so we're like about 10 minutes away from our like end of this. Let's talk about last minute sort of like thoughts about 7, 8, 9. What did we think? Do we feel like they could have done better, could have done worse? Let's start with you, Tony. What did we think about 7, 8,
9? I liked them. I wish they would have spent more time fleshing out the dream realm, because I thought that was where those episodes were going to go, because we spent so much time in the real world. And I was kind of let down that we only got the peek in there. Like, I liked Abel and Cain, and I liked starting to learn about the different denizens. And it just felt like, I don't know, I only got a peek behind the curtain. And what I really wanted to see, they didn't want to show me.
Yeah, I do have to say, like, when Matthew entered the picture, I was like, oh, cool, we're gonna get some things. But then I don't know what his name was, but he was the librarian with a jack-o'-lantern head.
Mark Hamilton's voice.
Was it Mark Hamilton?
Yeah.
No, it wasn't.
Mark Hamill. Mark Hamill.
Mark Hamill. Oh my god. I was like, I want more. Like, I want more of this. So I definitely agree with you. Beth, what do you think about 7, 8, 9? Any last minute thoughts?
I do agree that I hope that they expand more on the dream world in the future season. I mean, I assume they have to, since they've already seeded that. I mean, Cain and Abel are with the House of Secrets and the House of Mystery, which are huge, absolutely huge. And I have to imagine this isn't the last we see of Rose Walker either, because the Fates, when she runs into the Fates in the middle of this episode, they tell her to beware of houses. And so that almost definitely has to be a reference to the House of Secrets and the House of Mystery. So Cain and Abel, incredible characters. House of Secrets, House of Mystery, also incredible characters. They are characters. Hope we do get to see more of that. I think just a lot of what I already said about that. I do think that this is a really important storyline in the Sandman lore. And I think that it's also very important in the growth of Morpheus, because it's the first time we see him come even close to apologizing, which... And again, this is going forward. It really pays off. Actually, a couple episodes later in the bonus episode, they dropped the second half of it, Calliope. I think is actually where the narrative heart of this arc of Morpheus really pays off at the end, when Calliope realizes that he's potentially almost apologized to her. And it's this huge like shift. And I think that starts here. But I do think that all of the characters really did suffer a little bit from the condensed storytelling of this particular narrative arc. Even the people in the boarding house, I think, unfortunately, they ended up relying so heavily on incredible character actors to pull them off, as opposed to giving them the depth that they think they deserved. That being said, I understand why they condensed it instead of spending so much time on it. I think that glossing over bits did help people not think about the kind of crazy fucked up timeline. But the fact that Rose is a vortex, which means that she inherently pulls things to her and is a force of nature. She's a character that by nature does not have agency. A vortex doesn't have agency. She's not in control of anything. If a vortex could be controlled, if Morpheus could save her, why would people not be trying to control her? People are either just trying to use her as a weapon or destroy her. She's a force of nature. You don't control a hurricane. And when you already have a character that is inherently agencyless, and then you reduce the amount of time to develop every other aspect of her, I do think it suffers. But again, I hope that means that by glossing over this section, I hope that means that in future seasons, we will be able to get into these deeper aspects, because we've already cleared through all this story stuff we had to.
Yeah. Yeah, and the fact that the Calliope episode. So here's the thing. The last Sandman we did, Bill was on, Bill Waters, I think, and he goes, "Oh yeah, there was a secret episode release," and I was like, "I saw that, but I thought it was a preview." And he goes, "No, it's a whole fucking episode." And I was like, "No, it's not. No, it's not." And he's like, "Watch it after this." He was like, "Tell me what you think." And I watched it.
Also based on issues, yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, "Oh my god!" And the entire time, I was like, "Oh my god, please like me, Sandman. Please like me, Sandman." But like, he was like, the fact that you see him and his relationship with Calliope and like all of that, I was like, this should have been in the main series. I was like, what the fuck? Like,
yeah,
it was
fact
absolutely
that he came.
Yep.
Like, it was absolutely amazing. And the fact that he was like, "Oh, I'm gonna fuck this dude up for you," and I was like, you do feel right. And then the entire Cats Do Dream up, like, for like the first 10-15 minutes
Dream
of that
1,000 cats.
Yeah, I was like, that's my cat right there. And then I was like, that's my friend's, right? So it was beautiful. Anyway, yeah, I have to agree with all of your points. I feel like, they could have done more in this in 7, 8, and 9 than they have done. But at the same time, I feel like it was digestible for people that, like, especially like me, who haven't really read sort of like what the Sandman is, and in a way where I was like, oh cool, like, that's great. But at the same time, I know like sort of like these stories and how they play out, and like 8 and 9, I was like, I don't know if I'm believing it. I don't know if this is like something that they could have fully invested in. I feel like it was sort of like you said, Beth, like something that they had to address, right? Like something that they had to, be like, all right, like we have to sort of like address this in the first season, so that way we can address the second or however many seasons are after. I'm excited.
I think you're right though, thinking that it's about the characters.
Yeah.
I think you're like spot on with that, in that like when I just rewatched, I literally in like the 90 minutes before this show rewatched all 3 at 1.5 speed on Netflix, and like skipped through when I remembered, I remember what this was. And I found myself by the third one just skipping the Rose parts and only watching the dream parts, because in reality, all 3 of these episodes exist only to serve that narrative arc of Orpheus that we have to get through, but at the disservice of all the other characters who I kind of didn't care. I literally skipped through their parts. I was like, oh, I remember this. She's pregnant. All right, whatever. Like, he literally murdered her husband in front of her in like a horrible way. And I was like, I don't care. Like, it was all in service of his character development, which, oh, surprise, surprise, we've shorted the strong woman character in service of the male, whatever. So like, yeah, you're right. It's entirely in service to the characters, and it's entirely just to get to point B.
Yeah, which I feel like is so indicative of series, like for people that haven't read the comics or done that, and like, I get that they need to reach out to certain audiences, but at the same time, I'm like, this doesn't give justice to anything, right? Like, and you're like you did it for the character, but you didn't do it for the plot, right? Like, you didn't do it to the point where when the second season happens, if the second season happens, like, like, you're gonna have to explain what happened in this episode, right? And so I feel like, they could have done better with the latter episodes of Sandman. But unfortunately, my friends, this is like all the time that we have to talk about 7, 8, and 9. I know I did like I know, it's terrible. I like sped through that shit. It's terrible. 3 episodes.
Me too, on 1.5 speed. It's fine.
I could, like, it probably sounded like Animal Crossing people, and I applaud you. I applaud you for like doing that.
It was great. Thank you for having me.
Yes. So let's talk about where we can find both of you. Tony, where can we find you on the socials? What's going on?
You can catch me on Twitch at wyapaints .ttv. Yeah, well, wyapaints.ttv. We've been doing a lot of painting. Just finished up Archangel this week and playing through XCOM. So that's a good one.
I love that. That's amazing. And Beth, where can we find you on the socials? What's going on?
You can find me at Beth Scores with an underscore afterwards. I believe it's up on the screen over me. All I do is work, y'all. All I do is work. My photos are all just like my cat, and when I'm feeling myself and want to do a thirst trap, like, you're welcome to follow, but like, don't expect it to be interesting. You can find me there on Instagram, on Twitter. I don't know. Should I plug work? Walk to Attack of the Show. It's fine. Me and our fabulous producer here, the Stephanie on the ones and twos here, both work on it. You'll probably see us running around like crazy people.
Yeah, absolutely. Please follow these wonderful individuals. I stalked both of them for this because I like to do my research, and absolutely, I'm going to follow these two. And as Beth said, we would like to give a thank you to our wonderful and amazing producer, Stephanie. We love you. Steph. Yeah, Steph, girl, you know you're worth something. You know it. We love you.
Woman saves my life literally daily.
Yeah,
so
thank you for putting up with my shit. And thank you for putting up with other people's shit. So we love you all. Shout out to my guests, Beth and Tony. We love you. You're awesome. You're amazing. You're beautiful. We'd love to see you again. You can listen to our show on Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitch. All of our platforms are at Nom Talk Network. Tune in to our next. Sorry, I couldn't see. Like, I was like, when, like, I don't know if you have a Mac, but if you do that on the like touchpad, it like goes out.
I know exactly. Yeah, everything's going
on. It's terrible. Tune in to our next show. It's Not Much Review. It's the Hellraiser tomorrow night. Oh my god, I love Hellraiser. Oh my god, I play DVD. I play Dead by Daylight, and I play Hellraiser all the time. Anyway, tune in to tomorrow to like. Oh my god, I love it. Love scary movies. Horror movie bad.
No,
yes,
no
we love it.
Movies. I like sleep.
Yeah.
I do too. I sleep and have nightmares. It's great. But until then, I'm your host, Jordyn Orozco, and I hope you have a nomorific evening. Good night, everyone.
Peace.
Bye.